Why do so many autistic individuals experience sensory sensitivities and overwhelm? What if the answer isn't just about their senses, but also about trauma? Adverse sensory experiences can involve both physical and emotional discomfort, but trauma plays the key role in amplifying these challenges. In this video, I'll explain how trauma impacts sensory sensitivities, why emotional triggers create the illusion that the outer world is the problem, and how healing these traumas can greatly reduce and even eliminate the physical and emotional discomforts. Sensory sensitivities and overwhelm are often the result of hypervigilance, a heightened state of alertness that develops in response to trauma. Hypervigilance causes the brain to perceive stimuli more intensely, making sounds sharper, lights brighter, and textures more pronounced. This heightened state is the brain's way of staying on guard, scanning for potential threats, but it also makes ordinary sensory experiences feel overwhelming or even painful. When trauma occurs during an adverse sensory experience, like a loud noise or an unpleasant texture, the brain doesn't just remember the event itself, it also stores the emotional pain tied to the experience. For example, imagine a young boy experiencing a traumatic event, while at the same time hearing an unrelated loud, high-pitched noise. The brain creates a traumatic memory of the event, but it also stores that high-pitched loud noise within the memory as well. Later on, if a similar noise is encountered, it can act as a trigger for that memory, reactivating the stored emotional pain. This can create the illusion that the external noise is the cause of the emotional pain, when in fact it is the unresolved trauma being reactivated. Triggers aren't just limited to sounds. They can also involve anything that you can see, smell, touch, or taste. When a trigger activates a traumatic memory, the association between the sensory input and the emotional pain is reinforced. Hypervigilance can further amplify this process by enhancing the brain's sensitivity to stimuli, making the physical sensations feel even more intense. This process can be overwhelming. The brain's enhanced perception of sensory input means that even minor triggers can feel unbearable, leading to increased emotional and physical discomfort. Compounding this is the overlap of sensory and emotional processing in the brain. Sensory overload often triggers emotional overwhelm. A bright light may not be just visually uncomfortable. It can also lead to feelings of frustration, anxiety, and fear. The sensory and emotional systems feed into each other, creating a cascade of distress that can feel impossible to escape. Let's take a moment to talk about sensory underwhelm and the role of the creative mind. The creative mind is a state of internal focus, sometimes called daydreaming, where the conscious mind disconnects from external sensory input so as to concentrate on internal thoughts and ideas. Everybody accesses this state from time to time throughout the day, but for some autistic individuals, it becomes a natural retreat or sanctuary over time, and here's why. The external world is filled with sensory and social challenges that often feel punishing, whilst the internal world, where systemizing skills can be practiced and developed, feels rewarding. Over time, this punishment and reward dynamic can cause individuals to spend more time in the creative mind state without even realizing it. Each retreat feels safer and more rewarding than engaging in the outer world filled with overwhelming sensory input and potential emotional pain. Incrementally, these individuals exit the creative mind state only when absolutely necessary to function in their day-to-day lives. This limited engagement with the outer world leads to what is known as sensory underload. When the conscious mind spends extended periods disconnected from external sensory input, the individual misses out on opportunities to process and adapt to sensory experiences, which can further reinforce avoidance. While the creative mind state offers temporary relief and a sense of safety, it also creates challenges. Hypervigilance remains in the background, amplifying sensory perception for those moments when the individual does engage with the outer world. This causes sensory input to feel even more overwhelming, perpetuating the cycle of retreat and underload. The good news is, this cycle can be broken. By addressing the emotional pain stored in the traumatic memories, we can weaken the connection between sensory triggers and emotional distress. By resolving this stored pain, the brain stops treating sensory input as a threat, reducing the emotional response and allowing sensory experiences to feel more manageable. Healing also reduces hypervigilance. As the brain learns that it is safe, it stops constantly scanning for danger, naturally calming heightened sensory sensitivities. Over time, this creates a more balanced baseline, where sensory input feels less intense and emotional overload happens less frequently. Sensory sensitivities and overwhelm are more than just about heightened senses. They're deeply connected to how the brain processes and reacts to trauma. By addressing these root causes, we can help individuals to experience the world with greater comfort and balance. In the next video, we'll explore how trauma causes emotional regulation and mental health difficulties, which often go hand in hand with life on the spectrum. So if you haven't done so already, subscribe to this channel to learn more about autism, trauma and the path to healing. And while you're at it, give that notification bell a good nudge so that you don't miss out on any of the up and coming videos in this series. Because believe me, once you understand that all of your challenges on the spectrum can be traced back to trauma, it'll change everything for you. Together we can transform challenges into opportunities for growth. If this video has sparked your interest and you want to know more about how trauma underpins autism, then I've put a link in the description below to one of my blog posts, Unraveling the Autism and PTSD Overlap. It breaks it all down and explains things in a way that makes it simple to understand. Now I've also put a link to my free PDF, The Top 3 Myths About Autism and the Path to Spiritual Wellness for Autistic Adults, where you can begin your journey to healing trauma and embracing your fullest potential. And if you want to learn even more about how trauma relates to autism, then this video up here will give you everything you need to know.